You're listening to Leadership Made Easy, episode number 2. Our topic today is how to delegate successfully in order to get more time for the important things. Welcome to Leadership Made Easy. I'm your host, Bernd Gerob, creator of the online leadership platform. This podcast is for you if you're a manager, executive, or a supervisor who wants to know how to get the most out of your team so that your employees start meeting deadlines, doing things right, and exceeding your expectations. The fundamental secret of the art of management is delegation. That's a quote from Cyril Northcote Parkinson. Is delegating really a secret? Actually, it isn't. The principles of delegation are simple. However, many entrepreneurs and managers still find it difficult. So the secret seems to lie more in how to successfully implement the principles of delegation in practice. Just knowing the principles isn't enough. If you delegate a task, consider to whom you delegate, how much you must support and control, and how much room for flexibility you have to leave. And avoid micromanagement by any means. But what does delegating mean? Before we go in greater detail, let's start with the question, why? Why doesn't delegating work very often? As a manager, you have to make new decisions every day. What's important and what's urgent, which of your tasks can and which of your tasks should you delegate. A manager has to concentrate on the essentials. But if you want to concentrate on the essentials, you have to be able to let go. And that's where many people fail. Many managers know very well what tasks they should delegate, but they don't do it. If you ask them why, you will often get the following answers. You know, I have to do it by myself, because nobody else does it right anyway. Or, nobody really knows how to do this but me. By the time I explain it to someone, I'll have done it myself. I don't have anyone I can trust and who I can hand this over to. Let me cut to the chase. These excuses won't help you. Don't get me wrong. I believe you if you tell me that you don't have the right employee for the job at the moment. I believe that you're the best at this. But if you don't change this now, it will remain so in the future. Let me tell you how I learned to delegate. In my first startup company, we dealt with vibrations on heavy machinery. Just as a doctor uses a stethoscope to assess a person's heartbeat, we used sensors to analyze the vibrations of gears, pumps, and motors. We developed and sold condition monitoring systems, but also performed diagnostics as a service for our customers on site. Since I had already worked intensively on diagnosing machines for many years before the company was founded, I was usually the one who carried out such diagnoses for our customers. I was the expert at the time. As our company grew, I had to decide to delegate this task. After all, it was no longer my job as managing director to be knee-deep in oil and to diagnose machines on site. It was difficult for me to accept this change at the beginning. To be honest, I loved to do this work and I loved to be the expert. Although I understood that this shouldn't be my role any longer. Furthermore, none of my staff seemed good enough to do the analysis as I did. So I micromanaged my employees in the beginning. But because I was traveling worldwide to get new clients and to grow our company, I couldn't find the time to control and micromanage as I did before. I just had such a lot of other work on my plate, and I was traveling a lot. So I had to let go and delegate these tasks to my employees, whether I wanted to do it or not. Of course, in the beginning, some things didn't run so smoothly. My employees analyzed differently than I did, and they made mistakes. They made mistakes that I thought would not have happened to me. But then, after some time, they learned from their mistakes. They improved. And after 1 year, the results of some of my employees were not only as good as mine, but even significantly better. That was fascinating. After this experience, it was much easier for me to delegate tasks. I know if I delegate that it will probably get worse and take longer. But then there's a good chance that it will not only be done just as well, but even better. See it this way. Delegating is an investment in employee training. It costs time and it costs energy in the beginning, but it's worth it. Give your employees the opportunity to learn from their mistakes. Let them make mistakes. If you delegate a task that you have successfully done in the past, you will probably get a worse result the first time. But that's only understandable. After all, you've been able to learn how to do it for months or years. Of course, you cannot hand over a difficult task straight to everyone. You can't just trust that your employee will learn that over time. It doesn't work that way. If you want to delegate a task to an employee, you must first assess what experience, what level of knowledge and what skills he or she has for this task. Based on this, you have to specify, control, and support to a greater or lesser extent. But how far do you have to control? How much do you have to specify? In order to answer these questions, it's advisable to deal with the 5 levels of delegation. Years ago, I first read about this concept on Michael Hyatt's blog. I think it's very useful. I link to it in the show notes. I like to call the first level of delegation execute. Here, you specify everything exactly and in detail. You tell your employee to stick exactly to your specifications. Do exactly what I ask you to do. In this level, you have already researched, analyzed, and decided everything in detail about the task you delegate. The problem with this level 1 is you have to control. You have to control a lot. You need to know the task in detail. You only have very low trust in the abilities of your employee. That might be okay if a new hire just started working for you knowing nothing about the task you delegate. But you need to make sure that this changes quickly and that your employee will climb to higher delegation levels. In the second level of delegation, your employee already has more degrees of freedom. Delegating on this level means you tell him to familiarize himself with a topic in general, work out options, and then consult with you. This second level is called research the topic and report back. In the third level, your employee will work on a topic in detail, develop alternatives, and prepare a detailed proposal. He should explain in detail how he intends to carry on in the project. You then decide whether or not to proceed in this way. This third level of delegation is called make a recommendation. In level 4, the employee makes the decision, but later tells you what and why he's made the decision. I call this level decision with reporting back. The top level, level 5 of delegation, is when your employee makes his or her own decision and you have so much confidence in him that a report isn't even needed. This is stage 5. Decide without reporting back. I'll give you an example on these 5 levels of delegation. This example is about delegating a development project. Mike's in charge of the development department in a medium-sized engineering company. They develop and manufacture control and regulation systems. Mike's department got the order to develop the hardware for a new interface module. Let's assume that all of these experienced engineers in his department are working on full capacity. The only employee who could support him in this project is Jack. He's new in the department. Jack has just finished his studies and has no practical experience. Therefore, Mike cannot simply assign the project to him, as he would do with an experienced employee. That's why Mike will delegate the project to Jack on delegation level 1. Mike takes his time to prepare the project in detail. Based on his many years of experience, he selects which processor, which AD converter, and which memory modules must be used. The process is also clear to him. He knows which development steps have to be completed. Therefore, he writes down the procedure with exact steps and specifications. Now he hands over his documentation to Jack. Jack will stick exactly to the procedure and gradually work through the steps in order to develop the hardware. In this first level, Jack has little scope for decision on this project. After each small step, he reports the progress of the project to Mike and shows him the results. This is the first stage of the delegation. Do exactly what I have asked you to do. It's a matter of sticking exactly to the guidelines, since the supervisor has already researched, analyzed, and decided everything important in detail. Of course, this takes a lot of time for the manager. The employee is also quickly under-challenged in this procedure. There's nearly no freedom to make any decisions. What would it look like if Mike delegates on level 2? Instead of working with exact specifications, Mike asks Jack to take a close look at the customer requirements and familiarize himself with the topic. After that, he's asked to propose the further actions and steps for the development. The decision to take the next steps, however, falls to Mike. If delegated on the third level, Mike gives even more freedom. He asks Jack to familiarize himself with the topic in detail, to develop different alternative procedures, to select the processor, the AD converters, and the memory modules, and then to present the results to Mike. Mike will question the results and then finally gives his okay for the proposed further procedure. What's important here is that if Mike doesn't agree with Jack's proposed decisions, he shouldn't simply tell Jack that he's wrong and correct him. Jack, that AD converter you choose only has 16 bits. This may be in line with customer requirements, but in the long term, it will cause us problems. We must also think about future upgrades. Therefore, use the 24-bit converter instead. Mike shouldn't propose the alternative. He should ask questions so that Jack can work out the solution himself. For example, if Mike doesn't agree with the selection of the AD converter, he might ask, Jack, the AD converter you're proposing only works at 16 bits. This meets customer requirements, but there are already the new 24-bit AD converters on the market. I wonder if they might not be a sensible alternative for this project. What do you think? What speaks for and what speaks against using the 24-bit AD converter? This procedure costs Mike more time. He will discuss this with Jack. However, it helps Jack to learn, to think, and to develop his skills. In the end, Mike wants Jack to be able to assess this kind of situations and decide on his own in the future. If Jack were already an experienced hardware engineer, Mike could possibly hand over the project to him with much greater decision-making leeway. For instance, delegating on level 4, decisions with reporting back. Then Mike would only arrange 2 or 3 appointments with Jack during the project. On these dates, Jack will briefly present the current status of the project and the decisions he's taken so far. So Mike's informed in detail, but Jack has already made the decisions. For instance, which AD converters to be used. It's Jack's project. Mike will only be informed. The, let's say, premium level is the 5th level. Decide without reporting back. Here, Mike has complete confidence in Jack's abilities and actions. Mike no longer even needs feedback on the achieved project steps. His confidence in Jack is so high that he assumes that Jack will do the work in the best possible way and no control is needed. The higher the level of delegation, the higher the trust in the employee. The higher the level, the less time the manager has to spend making decisions, controlling, monitoring, and supporting the delegated task. It's important that you, as a manager, tell your employee upfront when you delegate a project and what you expect from him. It has to be crystal clear what kind of freedom and what kind of authority your employee has to accomplish the delegated project. In the next episode, we will talk about micromanagement. What exactly is it, and why should you avoid it, and how can you avoid it? That's it for today, folks. Thanks for listening. You'll find the show notes of this episode by going to berndgerob.com/episode 002. Are you ready to become the leader you've always wanted to be? Subscribe to my leadership community of like-minded leaders and managers and get regular advice, tips, and inspiration. Just go to berndgerob.com/subscribe. We finish every episode with an inspiring quote. Today, this quote comes from Theodore Roosevelt. The best executive is the one who has sense enough to pick good men to do what he wants done, and self-restraint to keep from meddling while they do it. Leadership Made Easy. This podcast is for you if you're a manager, executive, or a supervisor who wants to know what really works in management and leadership.